Hello, and welcome back to another week here in the Body First Healing podcast. I am Britt Piper, somatic experiencing practitioner, survivor, author, and today we are going to be getting into a Q&A episode where I'm going to be answering your questions that you provided to me on social media. Honestly, this is one of my favorite formats to do the podcast because it reminds me so much of our Tuesday calls in the Body First Healing program, where we get together as a group and for an hour straight on Zoom, I get to support the incredible humans in our program by providing in-depth support and direction to these incredible humans in the program. So I'm so looking forward to doing that today with you here. And honestly, I feel like these questions, even if they don't specifically speak to your seasons of life, they all kind of come back to this same powerful knowing. And that's that you are not alone in this path, and that there is support to be had, and that there is nothing wrong with you, and your body and your nervous system are doing exactly what they were designed to do. So whether you are listening in the quiet of your car, on a walk, or simply just folding laundry, just take a deep breath with me right here. And just let your body know that it's safe to slow down and to receive. Okay, so let's dive in. First question, how do you approach healing if someone doesn't have clear memories of their trauma? So not only is this something that I speak to greatly in my book, in fact, there's an entire 18-page chapter titled Traumatic Memory that I would definitely recommend diving into. But working with body memory is the core of what we do in the somatic space and in the Body First Healing program. So I first just want to start by setting the tone here for this question. And I'm going to share with you a statement, which is remembering is not the same thing as recovering when it comes to trauma. So in a lot of the trainings that I give to sex crimes detectives and violent crimes units in the military, I talk a lot about and I teach on memory reconsolidation. Now, there are two forms of memory. Okay, there is explicit memory, which is memory that you can explain, otherwise known as verbal memory or memory that you can put into words. So this is going to be autobiographical memory. It's going to be semantic memory. And this is kind of the memory that we think of when we consider recalling something, the who, what, where, when. However, there's another category of memory that we often don't consider, especially when it comes to the healing of trauma. And that is not explicit memory, but implicit memory. Implicit memory is nonverbal memory, more so the memory of the body. This can fall into subcategories such as muscle memory, emotional memory, sensory memory, autonomic or nervous system memory, and procedural memory. Now, procedural memory is the habitual way of doing things that you don't consciously think of. And when we are in the somatic space, we are working with, especially in somatic experiencing, predominantly this subcategory of procedural memory. Now, why do we work with implicit memory in the somatic space compared to explicit or verbal memory? So I first just want to say that when you're exploring things like cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT or talk therapy, you are working with explicit autobiographical narrative memory. However, in the somatic space, we work with the impulses, the patterns, and the reactions of the body and the nervous system. And there are a few reasons as to why we do this. First of all, when you experience trauma, for some of us, are remembering parts of the brain, such as the hippocampus, can go offline or become more disrupted, which is why we often can't remember in full explicit memory our trauma. It might come back as these fragmented layers, like it's kind of a blur. It might be a flashbulb memory, which is a really intense, vivid moment, but everything else is kind of gone. Or you can have these flooding of memories that come back over time. However, although our hippocampus might have been offline and not witnessed our trauma, our body was always there to experience. That's why we have books like The Body Keeps the Score or The Body Remembers. And these speak to the ways that trauma doesn't just live in our explicit memory, it also lives in our reactions, in our responses, and in the nervous system itself. You can kind of think of this as the ripple or the echoes of the past and how they show up in the body. So they can show up in your posture, the way that your shoulders crouch forward because you were taught to stay small, the way that your body subconsciously becomes red and puffed up and inflated when someone ignores you and you resort to rage and anger, the way that you feel fidgety and buzzy and like you want to run away when you feel like you're in trouble, or the way that the body shuts down or the posture collapses or you dissociate or become numb at the first sign of conflict. This is all traumatic memory showing up in the body. Now, I want to share with you a couple of lines from some of the experts in the traumatic space. So in the book, The Body Keeps the Score, the author, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who is a pioneer in trauma resolution work, he is a neuroscientist. He states trauma doesn't come back as a story, it comes back as a reaction. So again, it's less about the explicit memory and more about how trauma shows up in the body. Dr. Stephen Porges, the developer of the polyvagal theory, which we explore in depth in the Body First Healing program, it is the updated science of the nervous system. He famously states that trauma isn't found in the event, it is found in the response. So again, the response, the reaction of the body, these muscle memories, these procedural patterns that impulsively show up. Peter Levine, the developer of somatic experiencing, famously quotes that trauma isn't found in the event, it's found in the nervous system. And Dr. Gabor Mate, trauma researcher, shares that trauma is not what happened to you, but what happened inside of you because of what happened to you. We can summarize that you don't have to work directly with explicit traumatic memory in order to resolve trauma, which means that you don't have to go back to the hurt in order to heal. Through present moment awareness, through building up a capacity for a felt sense of safety in the here and now, through building up new choice and new procedural patterns, you can help the body to come back into a place of regulation and to get unstuck from the survival patterns of the past. Now, I've spoken to this in much more depth in previous episodes where essentially I am referencing the capacity to feel now or to respond now or to react now in a different way that maybe you couldn't back then. For instance, instead of shrinking in your body, as you work with a somatic practitioner, you work to expand the body. If you're someone who procedurally fawns or runs away or shuts down during conflict, maybe in a session as you're working with a practitioner, your invitation is to slowly and gently allow your nervous system and your body to be with a little bit more anger, right? In a way that feels healthy and tolerable so that you can start to take up space, so that you can start to be with healthy aggression, to advocate your needs, to defend, to set boundaries and more. So more than anything, it's not about the past or reconstructing the past. It's about allowing the nervous system and the body to catch up to what the mind already knows, which is that there is safety to be experienced here in the present. All right, let's move into the second question here. How can I tend to myself during painful anniversaries? So I thought that this question was actually a really beautiful segue from the first question that we have, because we're, again, talking about implicit memory. And what I really mean here is that when you have painful anniversaries, whether it's the loss of someone or a heartbreak or a devastating moment or accident, you can expect that your body will remember even if your mind does not. And so this is why it's particularly important during these times to create a container around yourself that feels safe and that feels present. That means safe people in your life who feel like an empathetic witness or a supportive partner or someone that you feel like is regulated enough and has their own capacity to be with whatever kind of activation might emerge for you. Now, your container is not just the people you surround yourself with, but the environment itself. Go into or prioritize environments that feel safe, that feel comfortable, and that maybe don't activate some of those old triggers or memories. And also within this container, we want to try our best to commit to predictable routines. Painful anniversaries can often remind the body and the nervous system of the unpredictability or the chaos or the shock of whatever the trauma was. And so submerging yourself in these predictable routines can create familiarity, which creates a sense of comfort, of settling and safety for your nervous system. And it also helps you to stay anchored in the present. Now, speaking of anchoring in the present, one thing I would definitely recommend, and that I have recommended around anniversary time, is to really start your day with orienting to the present. This means allowing the body to explore through sensory information, anchors that show you that you are here right now. So by asking the question, how does my body know that I am present in this moment? You can explore with your eyes, your ears, your mouth, your nose, your taste, your feeling, your skin, all of the things that can keep you grounded and anchored. Now, this is also one of those situations where I might recommend setting an alarm or a reminder multiple times throughout the day to orient to the present. This orienting practice shouldn't take any longer than 90 seconds. But as you orient, you then want to check in with your body after and ask yourself, how is my body experiencing this orienting? You want to notice and really savor any signs of settling within the body, any shifts into slowing down or becoming more present. Now, if and when activation does occur, we want to lean into the 3 E's of experience, express, and expel. So just notice what the somatic experience of the body is. Is there a sensation that you notice? Is there a posture that your body is taking? Is there an emotion that arises? Can you just notice and observe that for maybe up to 60 seconds, if it feels tolerable enough? As you do that, is there something that your body wants to express naturally? Maybe there is a word that wants to be spoken, maybe a noise that wants to come out. Maybe the body wants to move, stretch, open up, expand, close down. Maybe tears rise. And as you express, that's where the natural expelling of stress hormones completes within the body. So just know that if and when you are activated on these anniversaries, that should almost be expected. And the more that we push away from it, the more that we prepare to not feel triggered or activated, it actually creates more pressure on the system. So it's really a fine balance of supporting yourself and creating an environment and a container that feels supportive for this time, that feels safe, soothing, and regulating, while also having the tools and the attunement that if and when activation emerges, you know how to meet it with compassion and clarity. Okay, next question. How do you move out of a functional freeze state, especially while in conflict with someone? So just as a bit of a refresher here, your functional freeze state is a blended state within the nervous system. It's probably one of the most common nervous system physiological states that we see in the Body First Healing program and that we work with and resolve. It is a blended state where part of the nervous system is in a functioning state, usually of flight. When we're in a flight response, we are on the go. We are on the run. And usually we are fueled with adrenaline and cortisol to keep us distracted, to keep us going, to keep us busy. We are essentially muscling through life. However, on the other end of that, there's another part of the nervous system that's also stuck down in a bit of this freeze response, or what we call shutdown or dorsal. So think of your functional freeze response as going through the motions, but without emotion. Because when we're in this dorsal state, there are higher levels of numbing hormones. There are parts of the body that can dissociate. There can often be affect collapse, which means that there's not a lot of emotion really present. And what can be really confusing to the outside world is that we can often glamorize this state as being the strong, resilient, going with the flow, #unbothered kind of individual. However, if you've listened to previous episodes, if you've done this work on your own, if you've read my book, if you've been in the program, you know that being an embodied human means that we are supposed to have emotions, and that the measure of our day shouldn't be by how good we feel or how calm we feel, but how good we were at feeling. So I first just want to validate that I love that you have an awareness that even during conflict, this functional freeze state is maybe not the most optimal state for rupture and repair. Rupture and repair is just another way of saying being disconnected with someone and then coming back together in resolution. So if there is a blend of functional freeze showing up in a moment of conflict with someone, that likely means that there are two parts of you really on board this ship. And the mission of both of these parts is really to escape. There's one part of you that wants to escape through shutting down, through going numb, through retreating into the turtle shell. And then there's another part of you that wants to escape by running away, by avoiding conflict entirely. So the first order of business when we're working with functional freeze is we want to work at the pace of the slowest part of us, which means that we really want to tend to the parts of us that want to shut down and numb. And why is this important? Well, we don't want to rush into repair work or resolution if there are parts of us that actually don't feel present. Because what that means is that you are overriding the body. And what can typically come from finding resolution in a moment of numbness can be fawning, where we placate, we pacify, we do all of these things to keep the peace. And so I see on a consistent basis that those of us who get really trapped into that functional freeze, muscling through, armoring up state, are also the same people who tend to respond with a fawn response during moments of conflict. They shut down their boundaries, they dissociate and disconnect from their wants and needs, and they might not even know what their boundaries and wants and needs are. And then as a way to avoid or escape the conflict, they apologize, they take blame, and they quickly move on. And although there might be a temporary moment of reprieve, it is not going to bring lasting resolution. In other words, this is not repair work. This is just a Band-Aid strategy. And the deepest and most meaningful relationships come when we can meet each other in our authentic boundaries, in our authentic wants, when we can meet each other in conflict with attunement, with compassion and connectedness. I mean, I just want you to think back for a moment about some of the biggest arguments that you've had with people that you love. Moments that you dared to set boundaries, to advocate for yourself, and where it eventually was met and understood. Whether it was a friendship or a family member or even a partner. If you think about those moments of repair, did you not come back together feeling stronger, feeling like, wow, this is someone that I know will meet me in discomfort, that will meet me in conflict, and I can trust that we can work through it. So again, if the intention is for lasting repair, then what we want to do is work with the slowest part of us. And in doing that, the first intention has to be to get present. Now you can begin by noticing the numbing, noticing how collapse or noticing how shutdown is showing up in real time. Perhaps you feel like you're leaving your body. Perhaps you feel like there are certain parts of the body that just feel offline or not present. And I just want to state here too that numbness is a feeling, right? We feel numb. So where are the parts of you that feel non-existent, the parts of you that feel spacey, nothingness, numbness? And then what you'll do next is you'll start to orient outside of yourself. Okay, take your awareness outside of the body and just orient your eyes. You want to do this through small movements. So just gently allowing the eyes to shift to the left and to the right, up and down. And what this does is it breaks up the stillness, the collapse, and the rigidity of the system. You can also see if there's any gentle movement that wants to take place in the body itself, like maybe opening up the shoulders, lifting the chin, turning left or right, stretching. And then after you've done a little bit of the micro movements and the micro orienting, then you can start to track, is there a place in my body that does feel present? And if you can't find an internal place, then perhaps can you notice externally through kinesthetic orienting a place in the body that feels present? Like the waistband of your shorts or the chair that you're sitting on or the firmness of the back of the seat. Now, these are things that you can either do in real time, or these are things that you can step away and do on your own. I find that a pause is sometimes necessary when working through rupture and repair as a way to really self-regulate your own system so that you can come back into the conversation with more capacity. All right, moving into our next question. How does somatic experiencing support parents who are experiencing postnatal depletion? And what are some tips or practices that you'd recommend for self-regulation as a new parent? So somatic experiencing definitely supports nervous system repair after any kind of stress, especially birth stress. And when you're talking about any kind of depletion, what you're really talking about is a nervous system that is going into more of a collapsed or an immobilized state. You can kind of think of it like hibernation. So when we're down in that state, but we're also working with the stress of being a new parent and experiencing all of these crazy hormones and ups and downs, we really want to titrate the work. So some practices that could support you would be micro practices, such as micro rests. Example here, even if you're feeling like there is so much to do, you have to tend to baby, you have to tend to yourself, you have to tend to others, there's a million things on the to-do list. What are some small micro ways that you can rest in the midst of the chaos? That might look like allowing your shoulders to drop. That might look like as you're nursing or giving your baby milk, allowing your body and even your spine to yield, which means letting go or relaxing the muscles around the spine. Now, this practice in particular is going to send messages through the spinal cord up through the brainstem to activate the parasympathetic state for rest and digest. Can you open windows in your house to have more access to morning light? Or the smell of nature, which helps your circadian rhythm come back into more alignment, more balance, more homeostasis, which is just going to help you manage your stress hormones better. Can you lean into co-regulation, either with your baby or with your partner? Sometimes when we're stuck in states of survival, the nervous system can really prioritize protection, which happens in our fight or flight state, or disconnection, which happens in our shutdown state, over connection, which is up in our ventral state. So intentionally shifting the nervous system's focus to connected and embodied moments of co-regulation can help support the nervous system. Co-regulation is going to improve oxytocin and your serotonin and your dopamine levels. So one example here might be that as you're giving your baby milk, instead of also being on your phone and scrolling, can we unplug? And can we just be present? Can you smell your baby's hair? Can you look at their eyes? Can you watch their little toes and fingers curl up? Can you place their hand in yours and remind yourself how small they are? Can you notice their breathing? Can you notice the temperature of their body? These are small little anchors of regulation that can start to rewire the system to notice all of these incredible moments around you that can bring in more of this sense of safety to support the nervous system in moments of stress. And then, of course, and I know sometimes this is hard to come by in those postpartum seasons, but really nourishing your body as best as you can. As a breastfeeding mother now for over 5 years, I have really had to prioritize nourishment because I didn't realize how much energy it took for my body to not just produce milk, but to also have those bonding moments with my child. It is a full-time job for your nervous system and for your body, for those of you who are nursing or breastfeeding. But even if you're not, nourishment through sleep, through community help, are all part of somatic and nervous system care. So just remind yourself that sometimes the bravest thing that you can do as a parent is pause long enough to nourish the nervous system that is nourishing everyone else. All right, moving into our last couple of questions here. Why do somatic practices sometimes create more feelings of anxiety before safety? So I'm going to just touch on this very briefly here, and I'm also going to reference back to a previous episode that I did called Somatic Healing Misconceptions, where I dive deep into this topic. But essentially, what we're talking about here is that when we come into our somatic healing container, what happens is we become more embodied, more connected to not just things that feel good, but also the things that have been pushed down, that have been suppressed or dissociated from the body. And so as we create more experiences to feel safe, to feel resourced in our body, the activation that was once held down from previous experiences that felt like too much to feel, too much to experience, that starts to finally surface. Now, you guys have probably heard me refer to this as thawing out. And so this is why somatic healing can kind of feel edgy, right, before it feels integrated. It is not a sign, though, that you are failing. It is not a sign that you are moving backwards. It's actually a sign that you are becoming more human, more connected, more present. And this is why it's especially important in this work to move slow and to really pendulate within your own capacity between safety and activation. And so although that thawing out, right, can feel like chaos, it is actually freedom, you guys. And there might even be a time where, for me, I get like this. It's like when I start to feel activation, I kind of get excited because I'm like, that means I'm moving into a deeper layer of something. It means I'm coming to know myself more. The next question here, is online somatic therapy as beneficial as therapy in person? So I will definitely say that both can be effective. In person can offer more of the deeper relational and somatic touch points, like the touch work that somatic experiencing practitioners are trained to do, such as myself, or working with proximity or boundaries or things like that. But the online container is still incredibly powerful if the somatic therapist or practitioner is skilled at pacing and presence. And it can also be beneficial because in these virtual containers is where you can often lean into group work, which is one of the most effective formats for doing relational work. Because as you're having these experiences, as you're exploring and processing activation in space with all of these empathetic witnesses, that means that you can be attuned to, that means that you can be met with compassion, with validation, with understanding, potentially in the ways that you didn't get back then. And what we can commonly find is that sometimes the trauma is less about what happened, and it's more about the fact that you were forced to face it or hold it or go through it alone. And so having that relational experience in a group setting, or again, with a practitioner or therapist who can bring so much of that presence, can be incredibly supportive. I think ultimately what I'm trying to say here is that healing isn't necessarily about the room that you're in, but it's about the relationship that you're in. And I am personally of the belief that all trauma is relational trauma, but that can be an entirely different episode. All right, my friends. So with that, I am going to bring this episode to a loving close. I just want to give you guys a reminder that for the month of October, I am offering a $500 off discount for the full Body First Healing program. If that's something that you are interested in, please reach out to me on Instagram at Heal with Britt, send me a DM, and we can chat about it. To everyone who sent in questions and who trusted me with your stories, thank you so much. And I just want to leave you all then with this loving reminder that healing doesn't happen in one big leap, but in these small, steady ways that you return to your body and your truth. If today's episode resonated, Please share it with someone who might need it. And if you'd like to go deeper into this work, remember that you can explore more through the Body First Healing program, the Body First Healing book, or simply keep tuning in here. Now, wherever you are, take one more deep breath. You are not alone in this journey, and your body already carries the wisdom that it needs. You guys enjoy the rest of your week, and I will see you again here next Wednesday on the Body First Healing podcast.